Charles Philip Arthur George was born on November 14, 1948, at Buckingham Palace, the first child of Princess Elizabeth and Prince Philip. From the moment of his birth, the world knew that this child's destiny was extraordinary. Unlike most, whose futures are unwritten, Charles's life was defined from the cradle. He would one day be king. Yet his journey would be marked by something few could have predicted: the longest wait for the crown in British history. As a boy, Charles was sensitive and shy, traits that stood in contrast to his father Philip's more rugged, military demeanor. The young prince often felt caught between the weight of expectation and his natural inclination toward introspection and creativity. He was fascinated by the arts, classical music, and literature, preferring sketchbooks and reading to boisterous play. But with his mother ascending the throne in 1952 when he was just 3 years old, Charles's childhood instantly became public property. His every gesture was captured by cameras, his behavior scrutinized as the nation projected onto him the role of future monarch. This yearly pressure shaped his character, instilling both resilience and a lifelong awareness of duty, but also a longing for a more ordinary, private existence he could never truly have. Unlike his predecessors, Charles did not grow up solely with private tutors. In a groundbreaking decision, Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip chose to send him to school with other boys, beginning at Cheam School before moving to Gordonston, a tough boarding school in Scotland. For Charles, Gordonston was a crucible. Known for its rigorous physical training, icy showers, and relentless outdoor activities, the school was designed to toughen students into leaders. But for the sensitive, artistic Charles, it was often misery. He endured bullying and isolation, writing in letters that he felt persecuted and lonely. His father, who had also attended Gordonston, believed it would build resilience. For Charles, it became a place of struggle, but also of inner growth. Despite these hardships, Charles discovered a quiet strength. He became head boy, proving his ability to lead, and he developed a lifelong appreciation for discipline and endurance. Later, he attended Trinity College, Cambridge, where he studied archaeology, anthropology, and history, becoming the first heir to the British throne to earn a university degree. His years at Cambridge also allowed him to explore theatre, cello, and painting, passions that remained with him throughout his life. These formative years were not easy, but they forged a prince who was thoughtful, scholarly, and far more complex than the tabloids later portrayed. In 1969, at just 20 years old, Charles was formally invested as the Prince of Wales at Carnarvon Castle, an event broadcast live to millions. Wearing ceremonial robes and a coronet, he pledged loyalty to his mother, the Queen, before a nation watching closely, yet the occasion was not without controversy. Wales at the time was experiencing a surge of nationalist sentiment, with protests and even threats of violence against the monarchy. Charles, aware of the sensitivity, made the unusual decision to spend a term at Aberystwyth University learning Welsh history and the language itself. Though his accent was imperfect, the gesture demonstrated his willingness to engage directly with cultural identity and national pride. The investiture was a pivotal moment in his life, a chance to prove himself not just as the Queen's eldest son, but as a public figure in his own right. While some criticized the pageantry as outdated, others saw in Charles a genuine effort to modernize tradition. The young prince, serious and slightly awkward, was thrust into the spotlight as Britain's future king-in-waiting. It was a role that carried enormous expectation, but also one that would define the rest of his life, an heir visible to the world, yet perpetually waiting for a crown that remained years, even decades, out of reach. On July 29, 1981, Charles married Lady Diana Spencer in a ceremony at St. Paul's Cathedral that captivated the world. The event was broadcast to over 750 million people across the globe, hailed as a fairy tale wedding. Diana, just 20 years old, charmed the public instantly with her shy smile, elaborate gown, and youthful grace. To many, she seemed like the perfect princess, destined to bring a fresh and modern touch to the monarchy. For Charles, however, the marriage was complex from the very beginning. He was 12 years older, reserved, and already emotionally tied to Camilla Parker Bowles, a woman he had known and loved for years. Behind the glittering spectacle, cracks began to form almost immediately. Their personalities clashed, their expectations diverged, and the relentless media scrutiny turned private struggles into public drama. While the wedding was intended to strengthen the monarchy's bond with the people, it inadvertently set the stage for one of the most turbulent chapters in royal history. As the 1980s wore on, the fairy tale unraveled. Charles and Diana's marriage became increasingly strained, and the press seized on every sign of discord. Diana's vulnerability and openness won public sympathy, while Charles was portrayed as distant and unfeeling. Rumors of infidelity circulated, particularly concerning his enduring relationship with Camilla Parker Bowles. By the early 1990s, the couple lived largely separate lives, and in 1992, they formally announced their separation. The release of leaked phone conversations between Charles and Camilla in 1993, later dubbed the Camilla Gate scandal, further damaged his reputation. By the time of their divorce in 1996, public opinion had swung heavily in Diana's favor. When she died tragically in a Paris car crash the following year, Charles was cast as the villain in the eyes of millions who mourned her. It was the lowest point of his public life, a time when the possibility of him ever becoming a respected king seemed in jeopardy. Following the devastating backlash of the 1990s, Charles embarked on a slow but determined campaign of personal and public redemption. He focused in his charitable work, especially the Prince's Trust, which he had founded in 1976 to help disadvantaged youth. Through vocational training, mentorship, and grants, the trust transformed countless lives, quietly proving his commitment to service. Over time, people began to see Charles not just as a flawed man, but as a serious and hardworking prince who cared deeply about his country. His passion for architecture, environmental sustainability, and social causes gradually earned him a reputation as a forward-thinking royal. Though his image remained complicated, Charles displayed patience, dignity, and persistence. He did not attempt to erase the past but worked steadily to show he had learned from it, slowly regaining respect from a public that once doubted him. In 2005, after decades of scandal and controversy, Charles married Camilla Parker Bowles in a modest civil ceremony at Windsor Guildhall, followed by a blessing at St. George's Chapel. Unlike his first marriage, this union was not about fairy tale spectacle but about enduring love and companionship. Camilla did not take the title of Princess of Wales out of respect for Diana's memory, instead becoming the Duchess of Cornwall. Over time, however, public perception softened. The couple's visible happiness, Camilla's down-to-earth charm, and her steady support for Charles gradually won over skeptics. The woman once vilified as the other woman was increasingly accepted as a key figure in royal life. Their marriage represented resilience, reconciliation, and the possibility of personal happiness within the rigid confines of monarchy. It also stabilized Charles's life, giving him the confidence and support he needed as the heir who still waited for his moment. While waiting longer than any heir in British history, Charles used his platform to champion causes often considered unconventional at the time. He was one of the earliest global voices warning about climate change, deforestation, and the dangers of industrial farming. Critics mocked him in the 1980s and 1990s for talking to plants and promoting organic farming, but decades later, his views proved prescient. His Duchy Originals brand, which focused on organic food, became a success, symbolizing his commitment to sustainability. Beyond the environment, Charles spoke passionately about architecture, calling for designs that respected heritage and human scale, often clashing with modernist trends. He also promoted interfaith dialogue, seeing the value in building bridges across religious divides. Though often labeled eccentric, his vision for a more sustainable, harmonious world became a cornerstone of his legacy as Prince of Wales. For over 7 decades, Charles lived in the peculiar role of being heir apparent. He became the longest-serving Prince of Wales in British history, spending much of his life in the shadow of his mother, Queen Elizabeth II. The Queen's extraordinary longevity led many to speculate whether Charles would ever sit on the throne. Some even wondered if the crown might pass directly to his son, Prince William. Yet Charles endured with remarkable patience. He refined his views, gained experience, and prepared meticulously for kingship. The wait was not without frustration, but it also gave him unmatched perspective and maturity. By the time the crown did come to him, Charles was no longer the awkward young prince of the past, but a seasoned leader shaped by adversity and resilience. His wait was not wasted. It forged a monarch with a profound understanding of the complexities of modern Britain. On September 8, 2022, upon the passing of Queen Elizabeth II, Charles finally became King Charles III at the age of 73. His accession speech struck a delicate balance of grief, tribute, and promise. He honored his mother's extraordinary reign while pledging to serve his people with loyalty, respect, and love. The coronation that followed in May 2023 blended centuries-old tradition with subtle modern touches, reflecting both continuity and adaptation. As king, Charles faces the enormous challenge of modernizing the monarchy for a new generation, while preserving its symbolic power in a divided world. His reign may not be as long as his mother's, but it carries the weight of decades of preparation, trials, and resilience. At last, after the longest apprenticeship in history, Charles stepped into his destiny, not just as a king, but as a man finally defined by his own story.